you guys, welcome back. Hey you guys, welcome back. It's me Nefertiti. So I wanted to talk about something. I feel like in this time of day it needs to be talked about because obviously you see the rapid news of this situation of sexual abuse and stuff like that. So it's time for us to take a good deep dive into it. Of course, those men that do it and those women that do it are deemed as unworthiness, of course, because they're preying on someone else. But when the sexual abuse encounterment happened, before it happened, the conquest before it happened, because remember, there's a buildup of a building events that happened preceding that made them make these choice of action. And because of that choice of action, and since Nefertiti wants to speak, I'm going to speak on that. So you have to understand, and like overall courseman of relationship, drama and news. Sometimes you know how when people feel like we can't find someone that's for us, we have to search elsewhere to get whatever needs we need met. This doesn't mean I'm agreeing with anything that this sexual abuse of proclaiming to be. Meaning it brings the best of light. No, it's just taking a deeper dive in the insight of the news to talk about. Of course, I've been sexually abused for 20 years of my life. Well, it was 13 years because if you're talking about minor, I was a minor and 13 years ago. So it was 20 years of me already having sex because I'm 24. And I've been having sex since I was 4 years old. I was raped, and yeah. So I just want to take as a therapist perspective, of course, this is for 18-year-olds and only. This is restricted viewpoints. I won't let nobody else get this message on this type of insightful news. But you have to understand on the walk of life of patterns that people walk in and the shoes and conquests that they each walk in individually. Remember, if a man feels that he's dapping, that no one will want him, what does a man do? Then he start praying and he start praying on his requestments because now nobody else will be with him and you left him with no choice to pray on his advancement. I don't find it deemable as reasonable of a situation to happen, but I can't stop the way people want to do their business and the way they want to do their life. I can only educate it as a therapist perspective and as a sex therapist perspective and as a survivor of sexual abuse perspective, but I can't disguise it anymore and than that, because it's like, it's even the truth of acknowledgement to tell you about. Because you remember, like, I was raped from my cousin. I was 4 years old. He was like a teenager. So when I speak on the time from his sexual abusing me of accountament, what was going through his psycho viewpoint of proceeding? Men are just being men, and a woman is just being a woman. And remember, when you're young, your innocence is there, of course. And a lot of men who are above age, who are not finding nobody to deem them as worthy to be with, it messes their mind of protocol up to seek that. Nobody's gonna want me. Nobody's wants me. Why does nobody want me? So they go towards this hateful viewpoint of themselves, man or woman. Because remember, there's some women sexual abuse to counterment, there's some men abuse to sexual abuse to counterment too. So of course, I just speak about this as an 18-year-old and older platform because I only talk about 18-year-old knowledge. So an 18-year-olds can only get this requirement of acknowledgement to understand the proceedings of how all these statues of events happen unto my life and other man and woman lives also. But then it puts them on a spotlight to understand how these events actually occurred and how it happened. If you're going through a sexual abuse encounterment for too long, then those sexual abuse fantasies can bring into a proceeding, of course, because then your dialogue of your brain structure feels like something's not meeting your eye because something's imbalance. Because there's some imbalance hormone that's imbalance, a feeling of nerves or thinking that the requestment must be made. But then the truth acknowledgement, when you think of it, of the teachings that they taught, basically in ancient times too, it's like that's not the teachings of way how they want to teach it in the real book of life, how it should be taught. Man should not force upon a woman, or a woman should not force upon a man just to get the sexual delay or sexual fantasy that they want. If you want your wife or you want your partner to remain the innocence, just for your own sexual conquest as a man, as an adult man, and as an adult woman, then of course, as sexual encounterments, you guys can play the slave and master role, of course. But in the history of ancient times, that's not what it all was cooked up to be. That wasn't all of what you guys remember. There was a lot of bad things that happened based on slavery. Remember, because slavery was a time where we were forced sexual labor, and slavery was the time where it was by our slave masters to see what type of sex slavery of sex the sex master want to proclaim for men and women. African and American, but remember, of course, slavery was doomed as one party versus another. Of course, because you remember it's all a party of how a man and a woman viewpoint of slave masters want to see for a woman's perspective, and see what it would translate in her life to be. But if you think about it, all of the scenarios of everything else, of the proceedings of how those proceed to, like I remember when me and my cousin, when he did his accounting on me, I was young, of course. So I keep it 18 years old and older, and I don't agree with any of those proceedings. That's not something I'm standing on to per se. Oh yeah, what he did was validated and was right to do. It was thought the right thing to do. He took advantage of me because I was a young age, and he wanted to put his own whim of his own feeling of what he felt in his life onto me to think about his own life in my shoe for me. I think of me as his gateway keeping drug. But no, sexual abuse is not something that is a permanent factor to a core, because if a man wants to have sex with a woman want to have sex with a man, or whatever those virtues to be, men and men, women and women, it's the reason on why they wanted to have sex in the first place. They wanted to build a deeper intimacy towards each other, a deeper fantasy that they can bring to life and bring the conquest of their relationship of acknowledgement to agreements. Like you guys know, like because I can't have children, I let my partner just empty himself, so because I can't have children, so I just let him empty himself. I let him just take his pride and take his account into like the slavery conquest of me, and let me be his slave and he can be my master. And of course, we are 18-year-olds and older, so we are adults, so this is how I view it as an adult, viewing a slave and master role. Of course, I talked about my sexual abuse to talk about that to you guys too. Of course, my sexual abuse I don't permit to talk about, to tell people that, yeah, what they did was the right thing for me. No, it wasn't. It built me up from where I was at in the past to where I am today, but it didn't build me up in the best stronghold or dustful ways as it needed to. It built me up because I became an escort and I became a prostitute type of living. And I had to do the day ins and day out of just sleeping around and everything else because I was forcing a sex slavery that this person of my family member forced it upon me to see. They said this is the way your life should go, this is how you should be, and there's a woman perspective, and just you should just listen to what the man wants, and then of course, that's just what preceded, but on a long-term vision plan, was it the best choice of action? Was it the best choice of view for my life? It wasn't, because then I had to heal from all my damages. I had to heal each day from the challenges I face in relationships and marriage. I have to heal myself every day from everything I encountered. So of course, the sexual conquest of that fulfillment wasn't the fulfillment that he placed on me to guarantee for me to vision my life to be with him with. That wasn't the slave that it was for me to see. It was a slavery that they wanted to place upon me and leave nobody else of enlightenment for me to see anything else for me to see. So of course, that's how sex slavery happens. That's how sex slavery happens. This is just me giving an announcement to let sex slavery understand exactly how sex slavery and abuse happened for me. And I hope it could change somebody else's mindset of how the thinking of it going, so the therapy that needs to be approached to gets approached. So that way everything is an accountment for the therapy and the healing therapy of each individual who was sexually abused, Of course, I don't do child therapy. I do only adult therapy because I keep all my topics all for adults to talk about to heal. But at least you guys now learn from the insight of what I've encountered from my sexual abuse at a young age. For the 13 years of me encountering it, I got raped at 4 years old by my significant family member. And yeah, and he raped on me since it was the time of his life, of time of day. It wasn't ever going to stop, and he was never going to want to stop on my prey of me. So, of course, on that challenge that I had to challenge myself with day and night, at least I know as a woman that I healed myself from that pain of injury. And of course, I know they say I should talk about this to a supervised therapist, of course. But as a therapist and as a sex therapist, I bring forth this knowledge so that way people can know my story too and know what shoe I walked into, because now it could heal me and it can heal somebody else too to understand on those viewpoints of how men's psychological needs are and how women's psychological needs are based on the proceedings of not being able to find somebody or whatever it is the issue was. Because remember, everybody wants to find somebody out there that's for them, and based on what everybody else want to believe about from ancient times of slavery, to say that, oh yeah, that women should just be slaves and the man should just be the masters to the woman, and then get the slavery happening. Do you see how all of that was interconnected? You know, exactly. The taking advantage and taking a prey and taking a missional statement of making a situation in their own hands to be a part on. Yes, no. As a sexual abuse survivor, I know what I say. Prevention onto that sexual fantasies. Prevent those sexual fantasies from ever happening. You know, because it's like, of course, if you have a young one, you know, you can understand of their acknowledgments of what they feel from the early days of life. You could see it. You could see if they feel like they don't feel like themselves, if they feel like there's something about themselves missing. That's what makes men go into those effects of thinking like that. You know, it's like I was a prostitute as a young age. Of course, I keep all mine. This is just me sharing my story. I keep it all a document as 18-year-old, and a documentary of the result is I keep it restricted for 18-year-olds and only, because this is a restricted conversation. You know, because it's like, where did all these sexual abuse come from? Where did all of these conquests that men made on women and women made on men, where did all this like slavery happen to? Because it had to happen in ancient times, because in ancient times that's the only proof that we will know. But it didn't happen in ancient Egyptian times, because ancient Egyptians, we have our views of statues and we have our strong thresholds of what we viewed as appropriate and what's not deemed as appropriate. Of course, you know, it's like child sex marriages is not deemed as appropriate in my mind, and I know a lot of thousands of other people's mind is not the deemed as appropriate. I know in different countries have their own elective of goals of ambitions, but you got to remember where we all came from originally, anyway, from ancient times of what dynasty we all was. It was a sexual conquest that men and women proceeded to make slavery happen on the conquest of the sexual agendas, to make the women and men break, to break of their feelings of loving toward themselves. So they break on the acknowledgement that they can disagree with themselves and break in half. But as you can see, I grew up strong. You know, I grew up really strong as a woman, that I had to face all of my sexual endangerment that I have faced in my life to make myself come stronger today. So that way I can bring this acknowledgement to teaching to people to be knowing the lessons that we all learned at a young age from being sexually victimized, and knowing that somebody preys upon us and everything else. This just brings the answers to Sexually Survivor Month. I know it's not that month, but if you are a sexual abuse survivor, at least you know the story can resonate for you too. Heal yourself for the sexual abuse you encountered. And of course, for the people who are not really understanding on these consequences that happen, it all came back from ancient times of these scenarios of where everybody learned all these agreements. You know, it's like, because of course, slave masters had their agendas. There's a reason why slave masters had their agenda. It was to see the new harmonized viewpoint in the new modern time to keep occurring. and just to keep occurring on times and times and times. And that's all it will keep occurring to. But of course, when we as a leader and as adults leaders, we took our stand to make sure we prevent on those types of claims, to make sure our child was safe, and make sure we healed from our sexual endangerment, and make sure we talk about it to a therapist that we approve to talk about this too. Just talk about where we came from of our journey of life, to talk about all the healing we must make too. And I know as a conquest for me too, and in my life, me too, type of movement for me too. I know at least on the bigger inspiration of the Me Too movement to know that I was not alone to feel the victimization that I felt too. You know, it's like being sexually abused at a young age and seeing how I broke down and damages that happened upon me. But I know that as a grown woman, at least I know the remaking of my healing journey that I reclaimed to let the slave master know you didn't have the biggest shoe to walk through my shoe. And that's why my healing journey always began, and the self loving prophecy for me to begin. So I can now acknowledge, know, the love of God that God wanted me to seek, and what love that God brought into my life for me to know. Not the love what the sex slavery masters wanted me to see. Sex slavery happens. It happens in all different demographics in life. It happens in the pornography industry, sex slavery. Sex slavery and pornography. It's everywhere. It's like you can know a woman right now, and you can see her go talk to her man, and then it's like the requestment of what the men's are offering. But of course, everybody grown and grown up thinking of grown up thinking, of course, in their own marriages, of course, as adults, of course. That's all. That's what it is. It's their conquest with their marriage. So it's just part of that menu of being married. This is a part of that menu of how sex is. This is part of the requestment that your partner made. Of course, it's the fulfillment that they both want to feel, but it's the fulfillment that they are being proclaimed to be the person that they were meant for you to be. But they are not your slave sex master, unless you guys want to play the dominant, submissive role to each other. But of course, at least you guys know from my sexual abuse encounterment that I made a remark of the slavery that I have happened to me. So I can see a change in the protocols for other people else to think about too. Because it's not an agreeable factor. It was never an agreeable factor. Being gay, that's a that's a birthright of whoever choice of love that you want. But the sexual abuse factor, that's not even a choicement of claim that you could proclaim that you would want. It's like you walk a mile in your own shoes and then you see how 1,000 lights all hit you at once. Does it feel the same? Does it feel the same? Exactly. When you walk through that store in your own shoe of being sexually victimized at a young age and having to heal yourself at an older age, and then reclaim that healing that you needed to reclaim for yourself too. Was it right? Was it ever right? That's all I wanted to know. Was it ever right? Of course, this is for 18-year-old and older adult topics, of course. It's just reclaiming our healing from sexual abuse. That's all. But I want to say thank you for watching this video. Hit the like button, subscribe. And I'll thank you for joining me in this conversation to talk about sexual abuse and talk about why the standards of men and women, why they do sexual abuse fantasies, or what the relationship it is towards them and the conquest it is for them too. So of course I keep this as deemed for YouTube's platform as 18-year-old or restricted platform. And this is deemed only for 18-year-olds and older. This is just bringing some insight based on those type of thinking that is going on in this world about sex slavery. It all came from sex masters. Slave masters did this upon us. They wanted to break us down as a humanity of race. Black, white, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, whatever your race is. They wanted to break us down. Sex slavery, they wanted to break us down. Sex masters, they wanted to break us down. So we could feel like slaves in their party of play. And in ancient times, from the European times, from whatever ancient times it is still to Roman times, ancient times, everything in one, they wanted us to remember the mark of slavery too. So we can always remember the slavery we once faced, from our history, and our history can always know the slavery we faced day and night of the slavery conquest the slave master made upon us. And that's why the slavery has to heal us now too.